Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're also paying our humble Dandavat Pranam to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of Bhagavatam. And following the guidance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we are praying to Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told us that unless we can understand something about Radharani within our Bhagavatam study, then our study has been wasted if we haven't done that. Yadi sevā-vañcitāḥ syāma, yasyāḥ kṛpayā vayaṃ labhema, sarvaṃ prāpnumaḥ prayojanaṃ, dhāmni śrī-bhagavat pade, Kṛṣṇa-sambandhi sarvaṃ ca, Yadi na jānīmahe tutam, Aṣṭādaśasu sahasreṣu, ślokānāṃ bhagavat-oktiṣu, Radharaṇim vindamatada, nisfalam bhagavat-yayinam, radhikaya kripam vina, vyartasyat sarva-pariśramaḥ. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy dham and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then our study of Srimad Bhagavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, all of our efforts are in vain. So we are continuing our reading today from Canto 5, Chapter 13, Text 25. Sovira patir api sujana samavagata paramatma satatva atmani avidya jaro pitam chadehatma matim visa sarja evam hinripa bhagavad ashrita shritanu bhavaha. After receiving lessons from the great devotee Jaḍa Bharata, King Rahūgaṇa of the state of Sauvira became completely aware of the constitutional position of the soul. He thus gave up the bodily conception completely. My dear king, whoever takes shelter of the servant of the Lord is certainly glorified, because he can, without difficulty, give up the bodily conception. Purport. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 22, text 54, Sadhusanga sarva shastra koi, lavamatra sadhusanga sarva siddhi hoy. It is a fact that if one takes shelter of a pure devotee, one attains all perfection, even if the association is a short one. A sadhu is a pure devotee of the Lord. It has been our practical experience that the first instruction of our spiritual master infused us with Krishna consciousness, so that now we are at least on the path of Krishna consciousness and can understand the philosophy. As a result, there are many devotees engaged in this Krishna consciousness movement. The whole world is revolving under the bodily conception. Therefore, there must be devotees all over the world to deliver people from the false bodily conception and fully engage them in Krishna consciousness. Text 26. rajovacha yohava iha bahuvida mahabhagavata tyava bihita parokshena vachasa jiva loka bhavadva sahyarya manishaya kalpita vishayo nanjasa vyutpana loka samadhi gama atatad evatad duravagamam samavetanu kalpena nirdisyatam miti. King Parikshit then told Shukadev Goswami, "My dear Lord, O great devotee sage, you are omniscient. You have very nicely described the position of the conditioned soul, who is compared to a merchant in the forest. From these instructions, intelligent men can understand that the senses of a person in the bodily conception are like rogues and thieves in that forest, and one's wife and children are like jackals and other ferocious animals. However, it is not very easy for the unintelligent to understand the purport of the story, because it is difficult to extricate the exact meaning from the allegory. I therefore request your holiness to give the direct meaning." Purport. There are many stories and incidents in Srimad Bhagavatam that are described figuratively. Such allegorical descriptions may not be understood by unintelligent men. Therefore, it is the duty of the student to approach a bona fide spiritual master for the direct explanation. Chapter 14. This is the summary of Chapter 14. The direct meaning of the forest of material existence is given in this chapter. Merchants sometimes enter the forest to collect many rare things and sell them at a good profit in the city. But the forest path is always bedecked with dangers. When the pure soul wants to give up the Lord's service to enjoy the material world, Krishna certainly gives him a chance to enter the material world. As stated in the Prema Vivarta, Krishna bahirmukha hana bhoga vanchakare. This is the reason the pure spirit soul falls down to the material world. Due to his activities under the influence of the three modes of material nature, the living entity takes different positions in different species. Sometimes he is a demigod in the heavenly planets, and sometimes a most insignificant creature in the lower planetary systems. In this regard, Srila Narottam Das Thakur says, Nana Yoni Sada Fire. The living entity passes through various species. Kardharya Bhakshana Kare. He is obliged to eat and enjoy abominable things. Tara Janma Adhapate Yaya. In this way, his whole life is spoiled. Without the protection of an all-merciful Vaishnava, the conditioned soul cannot get out of the clutches of Maya. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Manashastan Indriyani Prakritistani Karshati, Bhagavad Gita 15.7. The living entity begins material life with his mind and the five knowledge-acquiring senses, and with these he struggles for existence within the material world. These senses are compared to rogues and thieves within the forest. They take away a man's knowledge and place him in a network of nescience. Thus the senses are like rogues and thieves that plunder his spiritual knowledge. Over and above this, there are family members, wife and children, who are exactly like ferocious animals in the forest. The business of such ferocious animals is to eat a man's flesh. The living entity allows him to be attacked by jackals and foxes, wife and children, and thus his real spiritual life is finished. In the forest of material life, everyone is envious like mosquitoes, and rats and mice are always creating position disturbances. Everyone in this material world is placed in many awkward positions and surrounded by envious people and disturbing animals. The result is that the living entity in the material world is always plundered and bitten by many living entities. Nonetheless, despite these disturbances, he does not want to give up his family life, and he continues his fruitive activities in an attempt to become happy in the future. He thus becomes more and more entangled in the results of karma, and thus he is forced to act impiously. His witnesses are the sun during the day and the moon during the night. The demigods also witness, but the conditioned soul thinks that his attempts at sense gratification are not being witnessed by anyone. Sometimes when he is detected, he temporarily renounces everything. But due to his great attachment for the body, his renunciation is given up before he can attain perfection. In this material world, there are many envious people. There is the tax-exacting government, which is compared to an owl, and there are invisible crickets that create unbearable sounds. The conditioned soul is certainly greatly harassed by the agents of material nature, but his intelligence is lost due to undesirable association. In an attempt to gain relief from the disturbances of material existence, he falls victim to so-called yogis, sadhus, and incarnations, who can display some magic but who do not understand devotional service. Sometimes the conditioned soul is bereft of all money, and consequently he becomes unkind to his family members. In this material world, there is not a pinch of actual happiness, for which the conditioned soul is longing life after life. The government officials are like carnivorous rakshasas who exact heavy taxes for the maintenance of the government. The hard-working conditioned soul is very saddened due to these heavy taxes. The path of fruitive activities leads to difficult mountains, and sometimes the conditioned soul wants to cross these mountains, but he is never successful, and consequently he becomes more and more aggrieved and disappointed. Becoming materially and financially embarrassed, the conditioned soul unnecessarily chastises his family. In the material condition, there are 4 principal needs, out of which sleep is compared to a python. When asleep, the conditioned soul completely forgets his real existence, and in sleep he does not feel the tribulations of material life. Sometimes, being in need of money, the conditioned soul steals and cheats, although he may apparently be associated with devotees for spiritual advancement. His only business is getting out of the clutches of Maya, but due to improper guidance, he becomes more and more entangled in material dealings. This material world is simply an embarrassment and is composed of tribulations presented as happiness, distress, attachment, enmity, and envy. On the whole, it is simply full of tribulation and misery. When a person loses his intelligence due to attachment to wife and sex, his entire consciousness becomes polluted. He thus only thinks of the association of women. The time factor, which is like a serpent, takes away everyone's life, including that of Lord Brahma and the insignificant ant. Sometimes the conditioned soul tries to save himself from inexorable time, and thus takes shelter of some bogus savior. Unfortunately, the bogus savior cannot even save himself. How then can he protect others? The bogus saviors do not care for bona fide knowledge received from qualified brahmanas and Vedic sources. Their only business is indulging in sex and recommending sexual freedom, even for widows. Thus they are like monkeys in the forest. Srila Sukadeva Goswami thus explains the material forest and its difficult path to Maharaj Parikshit. Text 1. Dandavat Pranam Tulsi Maharani Devi Dasi.
Dandavat Pranam.
Sahovacha Sa Esha Dehatma Maninam Sattvari Guna Vishesha Vikalpita Kushala Kusala Samavar Vahara Vinirmita Vividha Deha Valibir Viyoga Samyogadhyandi Samsaranu Bhavasya Dvarabhutena Sad Indriya Vargena Tasmin Durgadvavad Asugame Dvanyapatita Ishvarasya Bhagavato Vishnur Vasavartinya Mayaya Jiva Lokoyam Yata Vaniksarto Artha Parasvadeha Nispadita Karmanu Bhavaha Smashanavad Ashivatammayam Samsaratavyam Gato Nadyapi Vipala Bahu Prati Yoge Has Tattapopasamanim Hari Guru Charanaravinda Madhu Karanu Padavim Avarunde. When King Parikshit asked Sukadeva Goswami about the direct meaning of the material forest, Sukadeva Goswami replied as follows: My dear king, a man belonging to the mercantile community, the Vedic, is always interested in earning money. Sometimes he enters the forest to acquire some cheap commodities like wood and earth and sell them in the city at good prices. Similarly, the conditioned soul, being greedy, enters this material world for some material profit. Gradually, he enters the deepest part of the forest, not really knowing how to get out. Having entered the material world, the pure soul becomes conditioned by the material atmosphere, which is created by the external energy under the control of Lord Vishnu. Thus, the living entity comes under the control of the external energy, Daivi Maya. Living independently and bewildered in the forest, he does not attain the association of devotees who are always engaged in the service of the Lord. Once in the bodily conception, he gets different types of bodies, one after the other, under the influence of material energy and impelled by the modes of material nature, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. In this way, the conditioned soul goes sometimes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to the earthly planets, and sometimes to the lower planets and lower species. Thus he suffers continuously due to different types of bodies. These sufferings and pains are sometimes mixed. Sometimes they are very severe, and sometimes they are not. These bodily conditions are acquired due to the conditioned soul's mental speculation. He uses his mind and 5 senses to acquire knowledge, and these bring about the different bodies and different conditions. Using the senses under the control of the external energy, Maya, the living entity suffers the miserable conditions of material existence. He is actually searching for relief, but he is generally baffled, although sometimes he is relieved after great difficulty. Struggling for existence in this way, he cannot get the shelter of pure devotees who are like bumblebees engaged in loving service at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Purport. The most important information in this verse is Hari Guru Charana Aravinda Madhu Kara Anu Paravim. In this material world, the conditioned souls are baffled by their activities, and sometimes they are relieved after great difficulty. On the whole, the conditioned soul is never happy. He simply struggles for existence. Actually, his only business is to accept the spiritual master, the Guru, and through him he must accept the lotus feet of the Lord. This is explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bija. People struggling for existence in the forests or cities of the material world are not actually enjoying life. They are simply suffering different pains and pleasures, generally pains that are always inauspicious. They try to gain release from these pains, but they cannot due to ignorance. For them it is stated in the Vedas, tad vigyartam sa gurum eva bigachet, Mundaka Upanishad. Tad vigyartam sa gurum eva bigachet samit pani shrotriyam brahmanishdam. To understand these things properly, one must humbly approach, with firewood in hand, a spiritual master who is learned in the Vedas and firmly devoted to the absolute truth. Mundaka Upanishad 1.2.12. When the living entity is lost in the forest of the material world in the struggle for existence, his first business is to find a bona fide guru who is always engaged at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. After all, if he is at all eager to be relieved of the struggle for existence, he must find a bona fide guru and take instructions at his lotus feet. In this way, he can get out of the struggle. Since the material world is compared herein to a forest, it may be argued that in Kali Yuga, modern civilization is situated in the cities. A great city, however, is like a great forest. Actually, city life is more dangerous than life in the forest. If one enters an unknown city without friend or shelter, living in that city is more difficult than living in a forest. There are many big cities all over the surface of the globe, and wherever one looks, he sees the struggle for existence going on 24 hours a day. People rush about in cars going 70, 80 miles an hour.
Krishna Kashava Prabhu, here is your...
There are many big cities all over the surface of the globe, and wherever one looks, he sees the struggle for existence going on 24 hours a day. People rush about in cars going 70 and 80 miles an hour, constantly coming and going, and this sets the scene of the great struggle for existence. One has to rise early in the morning and travel in that car at breakneck speed. There is always the danger of an accident, and one has to take great care. In his automobile, the living entity is full of anxieties, and his struggle is not at all auspicious. Apart from human beings, other species like cats and dogs are also struggling very hard night and day for existence. Thus, the struggle for existence continues, and the conditioned soul changes from one position to another. For a while he is a child, but he has to become a boy. From a boy he has to change into a youth, from a youth to manhood and old age. Finally, when the body is no longer workable, he has to accept a new body in a different species. Giving up the body is called death, and accepting another body is called birth. The human form is an opportunity to take shelter of the bona fide spiritual master, and through him the Supreme Lord. The Krishna consciousness movement has been started to give an opportunity to all the members of human society who are misled by foolish leaders. No one can get out of the struggle for existence, which is full of miseries, without accepting a pure devotee of the Lord. The material attempt changes from one position to another, and no one actually gains relief from the struggle for existence. The only resort is the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master, and through him the lotus feet of the Lord. So we will end our reading here for today and continue from text 2 on Monday. Before we finish for today, were there anything to share, any comments or anything from the assembled devotees? Okay. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Tirtha Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Sri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhakti Veda Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Mai Ki Jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai. Sham Kun
Jai.
Radha Kun Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Jai.
Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Sarvaṃ Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari 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 Bol. Srimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Devi Dasi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
And Krishna Keshava Das Ki Jai.
Jai.
Dandavat Pranams.
Dandavat Pranams.